Making headlines tonight, stakeholders briefed on a national pandemic response plan as Barbados steps up its plans to withstand the deadly coronavirus. Barbados beefs up its capacity to deal with transnational crime and human trafficking. Jamaica, the first CARICOM nation to have a case of the coronavirus. And coming up in sports, Foundation and Harrison College run things on day one of the Esther Maynard BSAC zone.
Broadcasting from our studios in the Pine St. Michael, this is CBC Newsnight, starting now.
I'm Shane Jones, leading the news at 7. Government gathered the major stakeholders for a briefing today on the coronavirus and the country's plans to withstand the deadly virus. The meeting was followed by a media conference led by Prime Minister Mar10. Our Lisa Broom was there and joins us now with the details. Lisa, tell us who was there for that meeting and what was the outcome?
Thanks, Shane. Well, as you can imagine, that meeting was extremely intense. It lasted for nearly 6 hours as Prime Minister Motley and the full meeting, the full cohort of the social partnership got together to discuss, as you said, Barbados' response to the COVID-19. Now, as well as the regular social partnership, there were also representatives from the church, the opposition, and representatives from the Democratic Labour Party. As Prime Minister Motley said, it has to be a unified front going forward to deal with this virus that could have severe, not only health, but financial implications for the country if the virus finds its way here. So that preparedness, Shane, is encompassed in the National Pandemic Response Plan that will go to Cabinet on Thursday for approval. And it's also going to be overseen by an augmented National Security Council that has been stood up. Now, a major part of the plan is a 4-stage plan that speaks to how Barbados will operate in the event of COVID-19, and that was outlined during the press conference by Acting Chief Medical Officer Dr. Anton Best. Let's hear what he had to say.
We have 4 stages of the plan, starting at stage 0, where we are right now. And each of the 4 stages have specific triggers which will implement, or rather be the impetus for certain actions from the various stakeholders. So when we get our first suspected case, for instance, we will stand up the National Emergency Operations Center and activate the isolation centers. When we have in-country human-to-human transmission, that will trigger stage 2, and then a series of actions to follow. And then we have the 4th and final stage, which is stage 3, at which point we will declare a state of emergency, and any additional supplementary facilities that need to be put into action will be open.
Now, Shane, in fielding some questions, the Prime Minister pointed out that we are not at that stage yet where we have to implement those stages, but she did say that there are a few priorities for Barbados.
We must seek first to stop transmission and prevent the spread. And if that doesn't fully work, we must then slow transmission and prevent spread. And finally, Plan C is to slow transmission and to reduce impact.
Now, Shane, protecting the Queen Elizabeth Hospital is also one of those priorities, given that it is the island's only major treatment facility. So that has to be protected, and also because people who have underlying medical problems are the ones most susceptible to coming down with and perhaps dying from COVID-19. So as a result, the Prime Minister said getting the quarantine and isolation facilities ready is essential. So the Elaine Scantlebury Centre, the St. Lucie District Hospital, and the Barbados Defence Force at Paragon are all ready. And attention is now on the old naval base in St. Lucie.
That base, we are now starting the work there on a number of buildings, not the entire base, but a number of key buildings that will allow us to have another quarantine facility of housing anywhere between 120 to 140 beds. And I say so because they're finishing up the architectural details as I speak. And that will be for a quarantine facility. But most importantly, a capacity to have an isolation facility of 56 beds 20 with ventilators, and 36 without.
Now, Shane, outside of the health challenges, as I mentioned earlier, the Prime Minister stressed that the economic hit the island could take if people have to be quarantined or if there is a significant fall off in any of the money earning sectors like tourism. Well, that would be serious. Now, she did say that today's meeting heard 3 possible scenarios of how the already struggling economy could be impacted, and a plan has been put in place.
We will undertake counter-cyclical fiscal policies. A lot of fancy words for saying that we need to spend money in order to make sure that if a man can't work fully or a woman can't work fully within the tourism sector, that there will be other areas of economic activity in the country that we will now trigger or expedite in order to be able to keep as many people working as possible. Put it simply, that if a woman is working as a waitress, she has children, she may be put on a short week. If we can ensure that the children's father is working or the husband is working, then at least there's still money coming into the household.
Now, Shane, we also found out today that Barbadians in Italy are heeding the advice of the Italian authorities to cooperate in the largest clampdown to control the coronavirus in the Western world. That country has been put on lockdown, and it's a move that the Prime Minister has said will last until April 3rd. Now, CBC TV's Morning Barbados reached out to Lisa Ruck, a lecturer in English over there, and she says there were scenes of panic as Italians got word of the government's intentions before the official announcement. Now that travel restrictions are in place, she is conducting her classes from home.
Sunday evening, I was on my way to the gym and heard the announcement that then all cinemas, all gyms, all meeting places where you can have groups and crowds were closed off. And so things now, it's like a desert here. People are expected to work from home. Buses are empty now. I haven't been to the supermarket, but so far things are going okay. I'm home, I'm fine, but there's panic now.
And Andre Hinkson, a former colleague of ours here at the CBC, is also in Italy. He now lives in Rome. Andre says he's spoken to some members of the small Barbadian community there, and they're not panicking at this time.
And a lot of Barbadians and a lot of Italians in general are working from home, which is called smart working, especially those in the educational sector as well. A lot of schools have been doing online teaching, including myself. And of course, that helps to stop the spread and the contact between people in relation to this virus. So a lot of measures are being put into place to prevent the spread of this virus and, of course, to stop the creation of panic that so many people all over the world are feeling at the moment.
And Italy's favorite tourist spots were all but deserted, along with its streets, due to the nationwide lockdown. Meanwhile, Shane, COVID-19 is definitely getting closer. Jamaica has recorded its first case of the virus. Health Minister Dr. Christopher Tufton told a news conference this afternoon the unidentified woman had returned from the United Kingdom on March 4th and had been in isolation since Monday after showing respiratory symptoms. He outlined several measures as part of that country's overall response.
I would like to advise the public to continue to observe and perhaps strengthen their sensitivities to public gatherings, which we are discouraging. Non-essential travel. We continue to patrol irregular border crossings. Sensitization of key personnel at all air and seaports will continue. We have designated 4 quarantine facilities and others will be identified, and those are being used or being prepared to be used. And we are finalizing the retrofitting of isolation facilities in each of the island's public hospitals. On the readiness of the island's health system, the ministry has developed the local capacity to test for the virus, which we did, which has led to the confirmation of this particular case, thanks to training support and material support from the Pan American Health Organization.
Now, Shane, just to tie it all back up as I throw it back to you, you know that Barbados is in a BERT program sanctioned by the International Monetary Fund. The Prime Minister did say that discussions are being had with the IMF just to get a sense of where Barbados is, to see whether, you know, in the event that bad comes to worst, if there's need for any extra elbow room in terms of finances, that those facilities will be there for Barbados to access. So we haven't got to that part yet. We're still in the zero phase, as Dr. Best said earlier, where there are no cases, and we're preparing in the event that something happens. Back to you.
Okay, Lisa, I know you have been on the road for the entire day compiling and writing these stories, and that was a truly comprehensive report. We say thank you for that. The capabilities of the Barbados Defence Force, the police force, the prison service, and a number of key government entities to respond to the transnational crime and human trafficking are being boosted. The Caribbean Community Implementation Agency for Crime and Security, CARICOM Impacts, is assisting in the regard through a course for human trafficking, which got underway yesterday. Now, Acting Executive Director Michael Jones says human trafficking and smuggling remains scourges that must be addressed.
Well, today is a national initiative. It's an issue that we're going to have to address holistically, not only in terms of the representation that you see here today, but across the region, because whether you're identified as an area of transit or source or destination, it then tells us essentially that we need to work on this as a collaborative issue. Typically, you ask about how big a problem it is. The Department of State, United States of America, typically puts out a trafficking in persons report. And for the last couple of years, we would have been ranked on Tier 2. Essentially, we want to do as best as we can to improve our rating in that regard.
Chief of Staff of the Barbados Defence Force, Colonel Glenn Granham, signaled the BDF's commitment to being a part of the broad alliance fighting transnational organized crime and human trafficking.
The military is not often seen as one of the frontline entities in dealing with issues such as transnational organized crime and more particularly human trafficking. But I want to give the assurance that this again demonstrates our commitment to be part of that broad coalition of effort that's needed to protect our democracies, to protect our communities and island states, and certainly to recognize that the BDF is definitely a part of that alliance.
2 young men accused of shooting a Canadian visitor last month have been remanded to Dodds Prison. They are Travis Campbell and Alexander Aline. The duo was charged in connection with the attack on Canadian visitor Kenneth Elliott at his Eland Park, Christchurch vacation home on February 23rd. Campbell, of no fixed place of abode, and Aline, of number 1 Eland Grove, Christchurch, appeared before Magistrate Elwood Watts at the Oistins Magistrates Court. The 19-year-olds were not required to plead to any of the offences, which include unlawfully wounding with intent to maim, disfigure, or disable. They are to return to court on April 6th. The organizers of the gathering celebrations in St. Thomas turned their attention to International Women's Day on Sunday. Member of Parliament and Minister of People Empowerment, Cynthia Ford, told those at the event called Moonlight Upon Sticks she needs women to work more closely together. More from Lisa Lord.
There was no shortage of performances as Moonlight Upon Sticks came off in Welchman Hall. But before those acts from some well-known performers and school groups, there was a panel discussion earlier in the evening hosted by women on the topic of women. Member of Parliament for St. Thomas and Minister of People Empowerment and Elder Affairs Cynthia Ford says women need to understand that they are stronger when they work together. She says she wants to see more emphasis being placed on the island's girls.
All of us, I believe, except for you, ma'am, are past 60 or 70 or even 80. Yeah. And we have a lot of young girls who do not understand. They don't know themselves. They don't know what they stand for. They don't have the values and the virtues being fed to them by the older generation and the self-esteem. Plus, there are a lot of perpetrators, both male and female, that are taking advantage of our girls, to our boys as well.
Former Executive Director of the Caribbean Policy Development Center, Cecilia Babb, says women have progressed in several areas, but in others, not so much.
What stands out all the time is, of course, education, that women have made strides in the past 40 years and achieved a lot in education. Conversely, they have not achieved as much in the economic sector. The attainments in education, the qualifications, and even the experience doesn't translate into employment opportunities and positions of leadership.
Later that evening, Ms. Ford returned for a sit-down about Barbados in years gone by. She wants to see many of the old traditions return, like a village being raised by families.
Everybody in the village had been to raise those children, and I would like us to get back there, where you look out for each person's child.
Lisa Lord, CBC News.
Thank you, Lisa. Now, while there is a wealth of creative and artistic talent on the island, practitioners are often held back by a lack of viable money-making opportunities. And as Barbados moves to build out the creative and cultural sector, the issue is being put in the spotlight. This through a film documentary by stage writer, director, and filmmaker Alan Springer. The People's Party for Democracy and Development spokesperson on the creative economy revealed the film will give locals in the sector a voice and also some exposure.
Perhaps documenting some of the work that happens on the island and documenting some of the struggles of artists on the island could contribute something to what it is we're all trying to do on the island as artists. So the film, in a sense, represents a series of interviews, discussions, conversations with artists and art stakeholders on the island to get their particular perspective.
The hour and 30-minute long film titled The Fire This Time, Art Barbados, will premiere tomorrow at the Frank Collmer Hall. Discussions are ongoing to have it shown in theaters locally and internationally. Mr. Springer says he hopes the film will spur dialogue on developing the arts in Barbados. He also sees the industry as one that can bring significant economic returns.
If we want to have job creation, I think it's one of the industries where job creation can occur. If we want to monetize what's happening on Barbados, I think the arts is a good way to do it. The US economy kicks over almost $1 trillion annually, 10% of their GDP. Similar situation in the UK. There's no reason at all why that shouldn't happen in Barbados.
Still to come, the Guyana president appeals for calm as the country waits for the election results to be officially declared. Then a bit later in sports, BSAC action. But before we get to all of that, here's a tip from Cooperators General Insurance.
This tip of the day is brought to you by Cooperators General Insurance Company Limited. Insurance the way you want it to be.
Remember, not all disabilities are visible. Get to know the person. This tip is brought to you in association with the Barbados Council for the Disabled, helping to sensitize and inform the public.
Checking in with our regional neighbors now. In Guyana, President David Granger has appealed to Guyanese to remain calm and desist from engaging in activities likely to raise tensions as they await the decision on how the Guyana Elections Commission should treat with its final declaration of the 2020 general and regional elections. President Granger suggests the main opposition People's Progressive Party Civics claim that they won the March 2nd general elections based on its statements of poll for District 4 are false. A controversial declaration by the Elections Commission saw the incumbent, a Partnership for National Unity and Alliance for Change, winning Region 4, and this handed the coalition the victory at the polls. Mr. Granger says he, at the time, acted in accordance with the Constitution and the laws of the country.
GCOM is an independent constitutional agency over which I and the executive have no control. I assure you that, as president, I cannot, did not, and will not interfere in the work of GCOM. The opposition created an atmosphere of intimidation and fear at the office of the returning officer of District Number 4. This led to the interruption of GCOM's work. The opposition then approached the Supreme Court, seeking to prevent GCOM from making a declaration of the final results. That matter is now before the Chief Justice.
President Granger, meanwhile, is confident there will be a peaceful and lawful resolution to the issue and has appealed for calm. He condemned the violence by opposition supporters.
We've all witnessed the lawlessness and violence that have been unleashed on innocent school children, citizens, and police officers in several districts of our country. Our security forces have been working to quell disorder and to bring the perpetrators to justice. It is my sworn duty as President to uphold the Constitution and to keep our citizens safe. I intend to do so. I will not allow political malefactors to hijack our democracy and compromise public order and human safety. Law and order will be maintained.
Jamaican officials are optimistic the continued use of technology in the island's courts will reduce the backlog in the justice system. Chief Justice Brian Sykes notes that adequate training must also be provided for those using these systems for holistic transformation. CVM TV reports.
In 2019, Justice Minister Delroy Chuck reported a consistent reduction of the criminal case backlog over the past 3 to 4 years. Chuck also noted that the government was committed to supporting the Chief Justice's vision for Jamaica to have the best court system in the Caribbean in 3 years and one of the best in the world in 6 years. Adding to this, the Executive Director of the National Integrity Action, Professor Trevor Monroe, notes that technology will aid in delivering speedy justice.
The target of that Vision 2030 plan for that year is to build on the strengths over the years and to overcome the weaknesses, to achieve that fundamental goal number 2 of our National Development Plan, a Jamaican society that is secure, cohesive, and just. That cannot be achieved without a transformed justice system.
Sports is up next with Mark Seal.